All right. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may do so on ActonTV's YouTube channel, found at the top of our agenda. As always, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. I should have said that a lot slower. So the first item on our agenda is a public hearing on the FY26 Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education School Choice Program. We've posted this public hearing to start at 7:05. I'm going to make this meeting last as long as possible tonight.
Adam, did you want a motion to move the school committee recognition for anyone to 9 p.m.?
Yeah, I believe we wanted to take the school committee member retirements to 9:01 p.m. this evening.
They done an abstention.
I have a 20-minute speech prepared.
You have a 20-minute speech. Wait, we'll put yours first then. All right, well, who's got a second hand on there?
7 seconds.
7 seconds. Okay. So Andrew Shen is going to present to us in just a moment as soon as I call our school choice program hearing to order. 7:05. So, noting the precise hour and presence of the quorum again, I will call the FY26 ABRSD Massachusetts DESE School Choice Program hearing to order. Andrew, would you like to describe what this is all about?
Sure.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. On an annual basis, school districts need to hold a hearing regarding their interest in either participating in the intrastate school choice program or to continue to remain withdrawn from the program. So it's one of those things where it's not so much about anytime you want to join, you opt in. It's annually you have to actually indicate that you would like to remain withdrawn, which we currently have been for the past several years. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and for those at home, I know that oftentimes we refer to our elementary enrollment system as school choice, which is probably not the most accurate term. That's not what we're talking about. This is a system where school districts could elect to offer seats within their school district for students who are not residents of their public school district. And when they do that, then the state provides $5,000 to that school district as funding in service of taking on those students. We used to do that many years ago as part of our school district. We elected not to continue that several years ago, and at this point, we continue to have a handful of students who were sort of grandfathered in either because they were younger students or also they were siblings of students who were in choice, and so that's in your memo. Our recommendation has been for the past several years to remain withdrawn. I think for a variety of reasons, we've gotten feedback just around the cost benefit of school choice. Certainly I will just point out the most concrete example is that the funding you get is $5,000, but the average per pupil expenditure that we have is well over 3 times that amount. So there is just sort of a cost benefit analysis to that. So our recommendation is that, barring any sort of different perspective, that you make a motion and vote to remain withdrawn from the school choice program. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion from the committee?
I think Ginny wants me to keep talking about it.
It is a hearing, so we do need to have public participation. Any members of the public wish to speak on this topic? All right. Anybody want to make the motion that's in the memo? Oh, we have to close the hearing first. What are we going to do with it?
Second.
All right, so Ginny made the motion with her microphone off to close the hearing. 9 years and you still don't remember to turn the microphone on. Ben seconded. So all those in favor of closing our hearing? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous? Thank you. There's a motion in the memo. Anybody wish to read that motion?
I got it.
Thank you.
Would this be I, or do I still say the Acton-Boxborough Regional? I move that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee remain withdrawn from the school choice program. Existing school choice students will remain through graduation.
Second.
Thank you for Liz making the motion and Tori seconded. Any further discussion now that we're out of?
Can I make a friendly amendment that it's a school district, not school committee?
Yeah. So there's a friendly amendment that the motion be that the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District remain withdrawn. Do you accept that friendly amendment?
Absolutely, I accept that friendly
And
amendment.
Tori?
I do as well.
Thank you for paying attention, Leela. So the motion has been amended, that it's not just the school committee, but also the full school district that wishes to remain withdrawn. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so next on our agenda, if I can find it, is a welcome back to general session, and then we have school committee member retirements this evening. So the honorable member Kremer from Acton is retiring this evening. I have something, Kremer, apologies. Took me 7 years. So I have some things I want to share about Ginny, and I think Liz has some stuff she'd like to share about Becca. We'll open up for everybody else and anybody else, but I'll kick this off. So tonight is Ginny's last school committee meeting, and while I know she's probably thrilled about the idea of one less meeting in her future, we are going to spend a few minutes, just a few, I promise, to say thank you. Ginny has served on the committee for 9 years. That's 3 full terms, and I've had the privilege of serving alongside her for 7 of those years. In that time, she's been a fierce proponent for students, a trusted voice on policy, and a relentless advocate with our legislators, and also an unwavering champion for what she believes is right, a shorter meeting. She's always believed deeply in the importance of investing in our youngest learners. Her advocacy for fully funding all-day kindergarten has been passionate and persistent. She reminded us again and again that the foundation we build in those early years matters and that every child deserves a strong start and a free public education. And while Ginny brings intensity and conviction to every issue, she's also brought efficiency. Ginny does not have a high tolerance for long-winded discussions. She can spot rambling a mile away. If someone tried to turn a 5-minute agenda item into a symposium, you could actually see and sometimes hear the soul leave the room. Ginny's unofficial motto might be, say your point, vote, and move on, which frankly has saved us more hours than we probably realize. But what really sets Ginny apart, beyond her intelligence, beyond her advocacy, beyond her deep commitment to public education, is that she's the only person I've ever met who travels with her own salt and pepper. Everywhere. I'm not kidding. She has a higher seasoning standard than the rest of us, and honestly, Ginny, I respect that. Ginny, we will miss your candor, your sharp wit, your heart. You've left a lasting impact on this district and all of us who've been lucky enough to serve with you. On behalf of the committee and the community, thank you for everything. And now, out of respect for your legacy, I will do my best to make this meeting last as long as possible. Thank you.
Rebeccah was my fellow newly elect of 2022, so I'm going to talk directly to you. Rebeccah, through your tenure on this committee, you have demonstrated passion, drive, and commitment to our district. You've stepped up to the call when needed, whether as a chair of a subcommittee, as the face of the committee out in the community, or as a volunteer for Project Graduation. Your hard work has not gone unnoticed and is deeply appreciated. I know that we have not seen the last of you, and that you will continue to give to our community in other ways. Truly, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to say anything?
Ginny, I appreciated how helpful you were when I first joined the committee, especially around understanding some of the intricacies of the history of us not having all-day K. I think it would have taken me forever to try to pick up all of the different pieces. And Becca, it's been really helpful to be able to just call you and chat about things. And I've really appreciated your perspective. And I'm sad to see both of you go, but also thrilled for all the free time you'll have. So have fun.
Just appreciating perspectives. Ginny, I think you've always helped us remember it's the educators and the students, and we have to keep focus there first when we tend to get rambling down some of those other spaces, so I appreciate that. And Becca, I appreciate your mentorship. Again, you both clearly had a lot of impact in bringing the next group behind you on and teaching us the ropes, so thank you.
Vikram.
No, I'd just like to say, Ginny, I've always appreciated you being here because everything you said has just been deeply seeped in wisdom, and so you may not know it, but I greatly appreciate your wisdom. And Becca, I thought you were going to be here longer. It's unfortunate you're leaving. I thought you were just a stellar member of this committee, so it's sad to see you go. It's sad to see both of you guys go.
Anybody else? Bet?
I just want to thank both Ginny and Becca for their years of service, in particular Ginny for her institutional knowledge on this committee. Her knowledge has helped each and every one of us grow as members on this committee. And then with Becca, her energy, her passion, and her commitment to all the students, along with Ginny also, has really made our district a better place because of both of them. So thank you both for your service.
I wish I had more time with you two, both of you. But like what Leela said, I congratulate you for getting your time and life back a little bit. I know as working mom and volunteer, it takes a lot out of both of you, and I appreciate that.
I do not actually have a 20-minute speech. I'm sorry. I am sorry to be leaving a lot earlier than I thought I would. My plan was absolutely to stay a lot longer. I do love this work, and maybe it's weird, but I really love the energy of this group and getting together and discussing stuff. Like, this is democracy in action, and I mean, as much as it pains me, I could go on late into the night having these like minute discussions about things. I think that that's just, how the sausage is made in this fabulous, messy way. I absolutely plan on being back in the future when my kids are a little older and, things have settled, and maybe we'll be in a different place then, and maybe there'll be different faces on here, and maybe some of you will still be here, I hope. And I want to say thanks to Ginny, because when I think of somebody who's really out in the community doing work, I think of Ginny, because I first actually saw her at preschool events. She shows up to everything. She knows everyone. She is happy to lend an ear and a hand. And I think that you're a wonderful community member, a fabulous leader, and thank you so much for all of your time and dedication. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it, really, you guys. I first want to say that I've never, ever been accused of being patient. So I do appreciate that everybody has picked up on that. In fact, my daughter's favorite joke when they were little, which they would tell everybody, was, "Oh, Mom got tested for patience. She was negative." So I also just want to say that I really have appreciated working on the committee. We've had some very tough times with COVID and other things. I really appreciate, Peter, your leadership through all of that. It's a really, really tough job, and I'm very grateful that you're here, and I feel like our district is in very good hands. And, with regard to universal all-day K, I do passionately feel that no child in a public school district should have to pay to attend public school. I went from feeling like I was going to die on this hill to feeling like I'm going to die on this hill. And I would just like to say that our state legislature needs to step up. We have exhausted all options, and it's not fair, it's not right, it's not the best thing that we could do for our kids. And we need the assistance of our state delegation, period. And I really hope that that will happen, and that everybody here will keep the pressure. Everybody out there will keep the pressure. To me, it would be like telling a family who has a sixth grader, sorry, we will be charging you tuition. It's the same thing. There's no difference, and it just is wrong. So that's my final speech on Universal All-Day K, and I really have appreciated. I thank you, Adam, for sticking it out as chair. It's also not an easy job, and I wish you guys all the best of luck. It's been great getting to know you, and I really hope that you guys can, along with this administration, and I thank all of you guys too. You know, as Peter likes to say, he gets a lot of the credit, but it's a big team that does all of the work. And finally, to our educators, I don't think that there is a school district that has better, more dedicated educators. I know it's a very tough job. You guys have hung in there through a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of ways to experience this district, but I can say on behalf of my two AB graduates who are in this district from half-day kindergarten through 12th grade, that you guys are amazing, and I couldn't be more grateful. So thank you, and let's get on with the meeting.
Thank you both very much. So in addition to the beautiful hydrangeas and cards, there are in the front lobby a chair for each of you with the Acton-Boxborough crest on it. I hear they are highly uncomfortable, but very nice for the formal living room that no one goes in and sits in. Yeah, you could sit it. You should give it to the chair so that it makes the meeting go faster because it's so uncomfortable. All right. We're going to move on and invite our student reps. I believe we have Austin and Shaina here this evening. Just Austin coming up tonight? Okay. Come on up, Austin. Happy to hear from you guys this evening. You can sit right at the table, Austin. Remember to push the button on the microphone.
Hello, hello. Hello. Perfect. All right. Hi, I'm Austin. First, I'd just like to thank the school committee for rather late thank you for like 2 months ago. I remember talking here and talking about the sustainability policy, and a few other students also came up and talked about the sustainability policy. And while I was watching from the live stream, I still haven't given that true thank you. So truly grateful. And this will likely be my last update because I believe Julia and Diksha will be coming here for the next 2 months, but it's kind of surreal now. I'm ending high school in like 2 months, and we just had senior breakfast and senior community service day today. We had the senior assembly just a few days ago. I probably had to choose where I'm going to college in just a few days, and I know Shaina's already chosen the place that she wants to go, whether or not she wants to show that. And I guess for just like a few like small like comments on the new business today, on the DEI or like the Title IX like business or the new policies, I believe it is just a little bit more clear, and when I read through it, it just made a little bit more sense when I just like read through the headlines and what the content actually said. As for the JK policy, unfortunately, I am not an elementary schooler, and I quite frankly cannot remember what even happened in recess. So I can't really comment on that. But it's been a great day. I still have an AP Euro essay to finish, just like Shaina, and I'm probably going to leave soon, but thank you so much, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Austin. Congratulations. Hi, Shaina.
I was only planning on saying what I had written down, but Austin's comments, I think, are going to have me make some impromptu comments as well. Like Austin said, I am committed. I'm going to Wisconsin, and I've appreciated the opportunity to get involved however I could this year. As you may or may not know, my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, I didn't do this role, and then last minute I kind of felt like I could make a difference, even if it wasn't like super, super big. I liked being involved and getting to work with the other representatives. And not to make this meeting too much longer against Ginny's wishes, but I have something short to say. Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to share some recent and meaningful progress we've made at the high school in our ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Over the past few weeks, we've seen a noticeable and inspiring shift in our school culture. We recently hosted our second Student Voices panel, which this time featured a group of Muslim students who shared personal stories, challenged stereotypes, and offered deep insights into how their faith and identity intersect with daily life at our school. Several classes opted to attend, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Many students expressed how eye-opening and humanizing the conversations were. Another exciting initiative was our first ever Passover table, a thoughtful shift from our typical Hanukkah and Purim displays. Members of the Jewish Student Union educated on the story of Passover and gave out matzah bark, which was a huge hit. And students not only walked away with a sweet treat, but a greater understanding of the cultural and religious significance of the holiday. One of the most impactful days was during our recent Flex Block series, which I mentioned last time, where students were invited to participate in a variety of workshops centered around identity, justice, and community building. One standout workshop that personally resonated with me featured formerly incarcerated individuals who are now enrolled in continuing education programs through our partnership with Tufts University. Hearing their stories of transformation and resilience was deeply moving and challenged many of us to think differently about restorative justice and second chances. What's been most encouraging to witness is that at this point in the year, it feels like the school has made great strides towards prioritizing community as well as diversity, something that will hopefully continue with time after my departure. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments for either of our student reps? Leela.
Not a question. I just wanted to say that, Austin, it was really nice to be able to work with you through the sustainability work and to hear your perspective, and you certainly brought energy into the room every time you were there. And Shaina, it was really nice to meet you at ABRHS, and I remember you kind of being like, should I run? Like, I don't know about this. And so it's been really cool to see you here, and I appreciate both of you, and have fun in your next adventures.
Thank you, and I'm sure Austin says thank you too, wherever he is.
Excellent. All right, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is public participation. So per our school committee policy, BEDH, members of the public are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes. Public participation only takes place during this time. Speakers need to be recognized by the chair before speaking, and the committee does not typically respond to comments during public participation. Hi, Amanda.
Hello. So my name is Amanda Bailey. I live in Washington Drive in Acton. And I'm speaking to you right now as a parent and as an advocate, not in any official capacity. This is to bring attention to the remarks regarding autism made yesterday by the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services. I work as a parent support professional for an autism nonprofit. In that role, I have the humbling privilege of being the first person to receive many parents of newly diagnosed children and teens. I also run Introduction to Autism workshops for those families. At one point, I asked one of my kids what he thought was important for those parents to know. He paused and he said, "Autistic kids are worth more than you think they are." Wrapped in the language of institutionalization and eugenics, of financial burden and erasure, the HHS Secretary asserted that autism destroys families and children. He stated that these are kids who will never pay taxes, will never hold a job, will never play baseball, write a poem, go out on a date, use a toilet unassisted, as if these things are what impart value as humans. Some will never do these, that is true, but these do not define potential or worth. The Secretary's rhetoric invites shame over understanding and inclusion. This is an individual whose agency may be placed in charge of the oversight and enforcement of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Parents of autistic kids are fierce advocates. We're deeply divided on issues and varied in our lived experiences. Our kids range in their support needs, some intensive and lifelong. Yet we are universally scary when it comes to others messing with our families. On one hand, we've got this. Our major autism organizations, divided across an ocean-sized ideological gulf, even banded together today in an unprecedented joint statement. On the other hand, we need your help. This is also a plea to our towns, our communities. Our children need collaborative, early, person-centered planning through the special education process for life after high school. We need options and funding for adult programs, for housing. Many families are exhausted and overwhelmed. We need resources, shared advocacy, respite. Paraphrasing Jordan Levan, what destroys are ableism, unmet needs, and broken systems. We need your awareness, and more than ever, our kids need your acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda.
I would just want to say very briefly, Amanda, and everybody, I share your absolute and utter horror and disgust at the comments that were made by the Secretary. And I was remiss in not mentioning Amanda Bailey in my remarks. I didn't prepare anything to say before. There's almost nobody who works as hard as Amanda, and the amount of work and effort that you put in on behalf of our kiddos and families with special needs is truly just unbelievable. And I don't know what we would do without you, but thank you so much, and thank you for bringing that to our attention. And if anybody did not have the opportunity to hear about those remarks, I would commend you to do so. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other public comment?
Okay, hello everyone. I just want to introduce myself one last time before the election for everyone watching at home. My name is Glenn Cody. I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, and I'm running for school committee here in Acton. I went from failing just about every class in middle school to graduating magna cum laude with a computer science degree at UMass Lowell. And what made that turnaround possible was the dedicated support and mentorship I received from staff and teachers in my life. During college, I worked as a writing tutor from students all across the globe. And after graduating, I worked as a special education teaching assistant at Wayland High School. So now I'm called to serve on the school committee to help best serve our community to the best of my ability. And I believe we have to address the situation we're in right now, that these are just not normal times for our community. This is the 4th straight year of budget cuts, as I'm sure we're going to continue discussing tonight. You'll hear more of the challenges we're facing. Public education itself is under attack at the national level. We're hearing harmful rhetoric from very high up seats. And the way Massachusetts funds our schools is utterly broken and doesn't meet our district's needs at all. We cannot continue to endlessly cut more staff. We can afford to reevaluate what buildings we use, but we must do everything possible to protect our staff members from more cuts. I also believe it's important that we look forward to the future and we do everything that we can to lay the groundwork for fully funding all-day kindergarten. As Americans, we value public education, and we value ensuring that our community here in Acton remains as welcoming and belonging a place as possible. We need to ensure that we're working towards supporting all of our communities, all of our students and their families, all of our teachers, staff members, teaching assistants, and classroom aides, our LGBTQ+ friends, our immigrant communities, who need to know that we have their back, no matter what happens. We need to support everyone who calls Acton home. Our schools are a pillar of our community. We cannot and we will not go backwards on who we are and what we value. We can and we will build a better future for all of our students. My name is Glenn Cody. I'm running for school committee, and I humbly ask for one of your 2 votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Hi, Lisa. You've got to turn it back on.
Okay.
You got it.
Hello, I am Lisa Adel and clearly do not use microphones very often. I just wanted to come forward not only as a school committee candidate, but just as a member of the community who deeply appreciates the work all of you are doing. As Rebeccah and Ginny are in their final moments of their last term, I would like to take a moment to thank them for their service. I appreciate both of you for the incredible dedication you've shown and the ways each of you have brought your talents and strengths to both this community and community you have been serving. I wish you both the best in your new chapter, and just from the bottom of my heart, really wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Any additional comments from the public? You can leave it on. Amanda's right behind you.
Lurking.
Different hat.
Lurking, very different hat. So my name is Amanda Bailey. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Acton-Boxborough Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And in that capacity, I would like to first say thank you to Ginny Kremer for repeatedly serving as a liaison to the CPAC, for always having an open door and a curious mind. How can I help? What can I do? Tell me what you need. So thank you, Ginny, so much for your years of service. Deeply appreciate it. I wrote to you previously about the recess policy, or the language in the behavior and discipline policy regarding recess, and I drew your attention to the fact that there is language about recess in the wellness policy, asserting that recess is beneficial, that kids need to move their bodies in order to be healthy, and that it shouldn't be removed for academic reasons, but leaving some leeway to have it removed for punitive reasons or disciplinary reasons. I understand that discipline and punishment and restorative practices are all different things, but they are all responses to student behavior. So in reviewing the revised language in the behavior and discipline policy, no argument regarding safety. Student safety is paramount. But there is a clause that has been inserted around recess may be limited in cases safety or to participate in a restorative exercise. I urge you to reconsider the inclusion of that last phrase. Discipline and restorative justice or restorative practices, again, are both responses to behavior. Kids don't make the distinction. Their peers certainly don't make the distinction when they ask, where were you? Recess is a break. By definition, a recess is a break. If we recessed right now, which we won't, we would be taking a break. It's not a reward. It is the 20 minutes a day where a child has to rest, move their body, to regulate, to take off the burdens of whatever they're dealing with. The kids most in need of that break are often the ones who find themselves, due to dysregulation and impulse control, et cetera, having it curtailed or removed for disciplinary reasons or other. We understand that the administrators have concerns and they've shared anecdotes about student behavior and they need to address those in the moment. We know also that we have anecdotes from families about whose kids had recess removed for reasons they didn't understand why. So we're glad that you are addressing this in the policy. Research, again, shows that recess actually improves behavior. We want to protect that break for those kids. And would, again, please consider updating the language in the policy to protect the right to recess. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Any other public participation? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to the superintendent's update. Peter.
So, first, Becca and Ginny, I just, want to say thank you. Knowing it's your last meeting, I wanted to do something, different. So I was thinking of like public figures that I could look to for inspiration. So I'm going to do my best to channel my inner Cory Booker. Exactly. No, in all seriousness, I just want to say, sincerely, thank you for all the work you've done over the years that I've known you. Becca, being able to work with you on the SRO task force, budget sub over the last few years. The SRO task force was maybe a little bit more joyous than budget sub, given the economic circumstances, but really just, having to make hard decisions and understanding the community and families and just a real respect for people stands out. So thank you so much for all of that. Ginny, I think, you've been on the committee since I've been here. In fact, I think you're the only person left, right, since I've been here. So I appreciate that because I know I have outlived the average superintendent lifespan. So, thank you. But it's been great working with you. I too appreciate that you get right to the point. I think, it's so hard actually in times to just make the point, say what you need to say and be able to keep it moving. But when you talk, it's because you have something to say that's really meaningful and needs to be heard. So I really appreciate that. So thank you for all you've done and much appreciation. I want to also say congratulations to our two students. I know they have AP Euro papers, so they already ran out the door. But congratulations to our school committee representatives who are graduating this year. We're very, very proud of you. And then I want to start just with some positives going around the district. In the music world, there was a MICA Festival, which is the Massachusetts and Instrumental Choral Conductors Association, recently held its festivals. We had 3 of our bands participate in that festival. The high school concert band received a gold medal at the festival. The RJ Gray 8th grade band received a bronze medal, and the Blanchard concert band also received a gold medal. So congratulations to those ensembles. If you are around on April 23rd at night and want to go to a Red Sox game, get there a little bit early because they are actually honoring our AB girls swim and dive team before the game. So they will be on the field before the first pitch at 6:45 p.m. So get your tickets and show up. They might be more exciting than the rest of the game. Congratulations also to one of our seniors, just really did something truly incredible in the community, Sarah Willard. She actually, for her senior project, partnered with the Acting Council on Aging and put on a senior prom for our seniors. So it's just, what a great example of connecting our students with our, seniors in the community and being able to bridge that generational gap. So congratulations, Sarah. We do have some pictures and we'll be sending those out. Yeah. So we also held our final meeting of the Superintendent and School Committee Advisory Council. That is made up of both junior and senior high school students. We conducted our last meeting last week. We had 2 working groups this year, one of which was working on continuing to refine the role of the school committee student representatives. And then the other one was designing kind of communication maps for students at each of the schools, at junior high and high school. So our students gave us some feedback. They wanted a little bit more clarity on who to contact for different things and, to know that earlier in the school year. So that was something that has been in process for the year as well. I want to thank, Jen Faber, Heather Stauk, and Leela for working along with our 5 school committee reps and all of the student reps on that council. So thank you very much for all of the work on that. Vision of a Graduate continues to progress, and you will be seeing that come to you over the next few weeks. We were pleased to host 2 back-to-back workshops on Tuesday night with a variety of community members to take the development of our Vision of a Graduate to the next level. Nearly 45 individuals engaged in conversation and learning and contributed incredibly useful feedback that will be brought back to the Vision of the Graduate Steering Committee, who's going to take our first draft and refine it and share it back out with the whole community for a final look. Thank you to all involved in the important process, because that's really going to help shape our strategic planning efforts for the next several years to come. Also, just for that, if you were able to come, thank you to our performing arts students and our clarinet ensemble under the direction of Mr. Hershenow. They provided some wonderful music in the break, as well as our food services team led by Kirsten Nelson for the snacks that we had in between. So thank you so much to those individuals. I also just want to highlight, and I did it that night, both Julie LaLumiere and Debbie Sy, 2 of our admin assistants at the central office, just do absolutely amazing work to get everything set up and keep it running smoothly. So thank you to all of them. On the strategic planning and reorganization front, I'm going to actually hold that. It's going out in the update so the community knows about it, but we will be talking about that actually as an agenda item, so I'll save that for a little bit of time.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions or comments for Peter on the update? Andrew.
Peter, just a reminder about kindergarten enrollment.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so in an interesting plot twist, kindergarten enrollment is actually coming in higher than expected based on the NASDAQ projections. Last year, when the kindergarten lottery closed, we had 277 kindergartners registered, and then we opened the year with about 299 for our October 1st enrollment reports. This year, when the kindergarten lottery closed, or just after it closed, we actually had 320 kindergartners registered. Based on kind of that about 9% increase in students we get between the lottery time and the opening of school, we're projecting now somewhere between 340 to 345 kindergartners, which is, a bit of a plot twist for us, and was unexpected and good. However, based on that, if we program for the number of kindergarten sections we budgeted, we would be running class sizes of around 22 in kindergarten, which we think is just too big. And it would actually be, I think, just over 22 is the way it shook out. So we don't really feel comfortable doing that. So we're working right now with Sherry because we think we're going to have to actually add a kindergarten section next year. So we're looking at where in the budget we can make some reductions to be able to fund that. Just as a reminder, a large portion of any kindergarten section we add is actually covered through kindergarten tuition. And I pause on that. I didn't mean to have to go there tonight, but here we are. But a large portion of any costs for what we add in kindergarten between the teacher and the classroom assistant that goes with it are covered through the tuitions that come in. So it's not assuming a full $100,000 for a classroom. It's actually a fairly reduced cost from that. So we're working to make those reductions. Obviously, we have to work within the voted budget of school committee. It's not going to shift the overall budget, but we do really feel like we need to make that. Barring any, concerns that you have and share with me tonight, we're planning to actually add that at Douglas because there were so many requests at Douglas that if we don't add the section at Douglas, the only students who would be able to get in would be siblings of current students. And so typically we've also, then the second priority at Douglas is walkers. We would not be able to have any walkers go to the school and no new students that didn't already have family there. And essentially what we'd be doing is turning away more than an entire section of students who really, and families who really wanted Douglas, and they'd have to choose a different school to go to. So it's always a tough decision when we have to make those decisions about where to put sections, but on this one, we are recommending that section go to Douglas, and that is our plan, barring any concerns that you share.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All right. We will move on to our guests and presentations. Up first this evening is Principal Jim Marcotte, who is planning on managing some ear infections, I hear, the second half of next week, based on his principal's update that I received. But
So I did write to Family Day and say my family will spend one night this week at a hotel because my kids want to swim in a pool. I just took a bet for how many ear infections I'll end up with in a week from now. But we're playing the odds because fun is fun. So thanks for having me. I'm setting my timer to be always. I do this every year, but especially tonight. So thanks for letting me be here to talk about the junior high. We've had a really great year, and complicated year and hard year for all the reasons that you already know. But we're still trying to build this joyful, inclusive community of engaged learners. I think we're doing a good job, but we still have more work to do. What I'll tell you about tonight is some of the student learning and data teams that we've tried out this year. I'll talk a little bit about attendance, talk about interrupting hate and bias, planning for next year, and a little bit of the fun stuff that we do too. So this year, for the first time, we really dug deep on data teams at the junior high, particularly around English and math. And what we were able to do for a little while was to use a period already existing in our day, directed study, and we used data, MCAS, iReady, common assessments, and other classroom-based measures to kind of figure out who are some students who need some extra help, extra something. And it could be kids who, we ran several groups, math, fact, fluency, kids who really need to master from fraction concepts. So we did small groups during directed study with our math teachers and our ELA teachers. We did 2 sessions, 2 6 or 7 week sessions each, 71 kids the first time, 101 kids the next time. And really, we could say positively that the outcomes were good in that kids felt more confident in their English class as a result of kind of doing some small group work, and more confident in their math class for the same reasons. And then we had to pause, because we were asking teachers to do too much, asking teachers to do things that were outside of their contract. And I always benefit from the amazing junior high teachers who are like, all right, Jim wants me to do this, let's try it. And we tried it, and they gave it a huge effort, and we made some good progress, and then we decided, no, it's not the right time. So we backed out of that, and you see that's my computer that sits there on my left hand every day. And it actually came from Instagram about more like fitness and healthy living. Be stubborn with the vision, be flexible with the plan. I knew the vision still is we need to get to all students in a different way than we're doing, but we need to do it in a different way. So we paused. We will reassess when we have some better opportunity to do that. We're still using data, we're still studying kids and really tracking their growth, just not with that workshop model. You know that attendance is a challenge for us, for the district, for the state, the nation. These are the DESE numbers for the last 3 years at the junior high school, so certainly we've made progress in the right direction by making sure kids are at school as much as they can be. When I think about why students aren't coming to school, the reasons are listed there. Always acute illnesses, right? The strep, the flu, There's been a lot of stuff this year. We have students with chronic illness. We have students who still travel and take time on either ends of vacations or long weekends. We have challenges with housing instability. When students don't know where they're necessarily sleeping on a given night, they're not necessarily getting to school the next day. Despite our efforts to go get them to arrange transportation, all those things in place, it still presents a barrier. At times there are students who are school avoidant, and at times there are family systems that really complicate students getting to school on a regular basis. I was studying and thinking through, like, how do I visualize what it looks like? And so I took last year's data and mapped it out on a chart. The red numbers show anything that's less than 95% attendance. So that top graph is from last March. The bottom graph is this March. So really, if I looked at all 10 months of our school year, last year and this year, Mondays and Fridays are our hardest days to have a stronger attendance. That's not a surprise, I would imagine. When I did last year's data, April 8th, 2024, was our lowest attendance in the 2 years that I've studied it. It was 87.7%. Does anyone remember why? We had to Google it because we didn't know why either. The solar eclipse. The day of the solar eclipse, we only had 87.7% of our kids in school. That's a lifetime event. Nobody a hard time of missing school that day. But the point is, we're trying to study what's going on and how can we be supportive. And so also looking at data, this year is the top row versus last year. This was as of day 130 of our school year. This year we have 60 students who have met the threshold for missing 10% of that length of the year at that point, so they've missed 13 days. We're not terribly far off from last year, but we are in a different place. What we try to think about is, why would kids want to come to school? Well, it's because we promote a sense of belonging as much as we can. They want to come see their friends and classmates. We hope that they have trusted adults, and they generally tell us they do. And we want to build in this, they want to come to school to learn. And I think a lot of them do that. And we know for many students, a predictable routine really helps. That's what they do. They come because they get breakfast and they get lunch, and they see their friends at lunch, and they do the predictable parts of what being an adolescent entail. We do our follow-up, monthly attendance letters from our assistant principals. Our counselors, our APs are always in conversation with kids and families about, hey, what's going on? How can I help you? I've been somewhat bold when I talk to incoming 6th grade parents, and I remember in the auditorium last year, and I'll do it again the week after vacation, 7th grade and 8th grade become the times that, and this is no slight to elementary because it's equally important, it's really hard for you to miss school when you go to Disney for a week. There's work to make up. There's tests that you miss, and it's hard on your child when they come back. And so I'm bold when I say that, and people take it how they do. And yet our attendance is more challenging this year, so maybe I'm not actually being effective. But the point is, we're talking about it a lot. Kids being in school is really important to all of us. Another area that we spent time on this year is really trying to educate students about how they help to interrupt hate and bias. You've seen the issues that we've faced over the past couple of years. Working with last year, there's a committee to kind of train staff on this concept. And so we then brought it to train our students. And so I did a team at a time, 100-ish students at a time, really with these 4 strategies of interrupting, questioning, educating, and echoing. And we did an interactive activity with their Chromebooks, and they were, dragging their dot to the thing that they felt comfortable doing in that moment. And it was productive, I feel. And I say to them, the easiest of the things up there is echo, because somebody else took a bold move to say, hey, I don't like what you just said. Hey, we don't say that here. It's really important for that second and third person to jump in and be like, I agree with her. He's right. And so I say to them, we need lots of echoing, but we need a couple of people who are confident to stand up and say and interrupt, question, or educate to kind of move the conversation along. So we do that training with students in October, and I showed them this data, or a partial part of this data. So the chart on the upper left is what students say about how adults interrupt something when they see or hear it. And so I shaded in yellow, obviously, where we want to be. And so last spring's students responded that about 83% of them said, yep, I've almost always, frequently, or sometimes seen an adult interrupt. In the fall of this year, 88% of students said that they did. So that's an increase, the positive for sure. The goal is to get students to do it more. So last spring, about 56% of kids say they've seen a student interrupt. When we took it this December, about 63% said they did. So we're growing in the right direction for sure. We're doing another version of this survey on May 2nd through our advisory. So I'm really hopeful, and I told them, I want to see better numbers than this. I want to know that you're all engaging and trying to figure this out for the behalf of your classmates. As we talk about for next year, the two goals that I'm kind of working on right now and have started to talk with the leadership team about is we have two major things. One is adjusting to what is new next year. So we are reducing a team. Our 7th team is going to be a combined 7th and 8th grade split team. We're going to have larger class sizes than we're used to. Well, teachers will have caseloads of about 125 students. That's going to take us some time to figure out what that feels like, because you noticed I talked already about like that instruction, that student learning piece, because it's going to feel different when you've got larger classes and larger caseloads. So in addition to adjusting to what that feels like, we need to focus in on we couldn't do that tier 2 pullout workshop because it's just not right for us right now, and it's not kind of contractually where we are. So we need to dig in deep on was every student getting every period of the day, and how can we build skill for teachers there? And so we just did a quick survey on what teachers feel they need for professional learning for next year. And it certainly comes back to instruction for ML learners. It comes back to really, and as simple as like making sure we really understand what the framework that DESE prescribes, how are we making that actionable in the classroom? So that's kind of where our focus is for next year to start us off. Finally, I want to show you just some pictures of the fun stuff, right? So these are from our Instagram account mostly, but the picture on the left with the hearts was a really cool, spontaneous kind of, every student in advisory was assigned the name of somebody else. They had to, as simple as put the student's name and adult's name on a heart. The hearts all got hung up in the cafeteria, and you would have seen right around Valentine's Day, the kids wandering through the cafeteria looking for their own name and finding it, and having a friend say like, oh, you're over on that wall. And another teacher did to me, he was like, Jim, you're over there. And it was, Mr. Marcotte, thanks for always smiling. I'm like, wow, all right, they get me, that's awesome. So yeah, that quickly went up on Instagram, and then we had a volleyball tournament. You would not think that one of the coolest parts of the Thanksgiving assembly is the turkey drawing contest, but teams cheer on their representative to the best turkey artist. So you see the 4 reps from the 7th grade there. And the newest thing that we did this year, part of advisory, was the 100 missing Marcottes. So 21 pictures of myself, but 100 copies of them were put around the building throughout the week, hidden, and kids, when they found them, brought it back to the counseling office and claimed a point for their advisory. So it was pictures of myself from being a year old up through my school picture. Kids had a good time with it. So this is what we're trying to do on a regular basis. Do the learning, do the hard stuff, do the interrupting bias, while also remembering they're 12 and 13 and 14 years old and like to come to school and have some fun. So that's where we are. That's what we've worked on this year. And I'm happy to answer questions or hear comments if you have them at 10 minutes and 14 seconds. So I did okay.
Joni, 10 minutes and 14 seconds. So you have to just do 10 minutes and you win this year.
Twice as large.
Oh, twice as large, twice as much time? It's a good thing Ginny won't be on the committee when you present. All right. Thank you, Jim. Questions or comments? Ben, and then Yenshin, and then Becca.
So 2 comments. First and foremost, the small group work has directly impacted my family. Yeah. I've seen directly the impact that my son has had from directed study. It's the teachers who I want to acknowledge that have done more with less, and they are really the foundation of our society. So that's one. Entertain one more? Excellent. Moving on to interrupting hate and bias. I know that there have been significant incidences at the junior high this year from what my son has told me. Looking at the percentages of students who interrupt hate, I'm concerned that 74% of our students either sometimes or never interrupt hate. What can we do as a community to bring those levels up? I know you talked about it as a goal, but how are you going to manage that goal and put it into effect for next year for the incoming students?
Sure. I mean, the goal for this year was the first time that we actually started to train students on that, right? So that 4-step, interrupt, question, echo, educate, was new for them at all. And so the slight progress that we saw between last spring and this December feels good. And I'll tell you that, yes, there are incidences that happen. There are. I feel what we're trying to do is change the culture so that there are fewer of them, but we won't end them completely. But what we do is that when the assistant principal, the counselor, myself, other educators get involved, it becomes a real hopeful learning experience for those students. And so what we haven't seen is repeat offenders this year. And so I do feel positive that that is actually a real good takeaway, that kids say and do things that sometimes is highly inappropriate. how we respond to them and how we get their families to support us in that work has been promising. So it's a hard job, Bennett. We're still trying to figure it out, but I appreciate your and other people's support as we've been doing that.
Hi, Jim. I have a comment and a question. The comment is my family is new to junior high this year, and my observation of your leadership style is leading from the front. There's not a thing that you ask your staff to do that you wouldn't do it yourself. You're always there in the thick of it, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
My question is, can you elaborate on the part of the small workshop, the Tier 2 support? You're talking about that there's some discrepancy between what you asked them to do and the contractual agreement that they have.
Right.
So, can you
Yeah, the
elaborate?
contract is pretty clear about teachers, particularly in the junior high and high school, about the number of preps that they can have and the number of teaching periods that they have. So they can teach 5 periods a day, which is what we have them do. They can have up to 3 preps, which generally the junior high doesn't apply. You teach English 5 times a day. So we were within possibility there. When teachers really took on this challenge that we presented to them, they essentially treated it as a 6th class. And they did it because they knew that was the right thing to do. And it was not because teachers complained, Jim, you're working us too hard. It was actually the advocacy from the ABEA, which, Mike is a teacher in our building. We have really excellent relationships with the people. And they were just like, Jim, you're asking too much. And so that was about November-ish that we, maybe December, that they came to me and we actually agreed. We agreed. And so they were great though and said but let's finish the cycle that we're in. And so we went all the way through the end of January with that cycle. And I said to the teachers, I always do appreciate that you will do what is right for kids. And I have a responsibility to make sure I'm providing you the right working conditions and all of those things that are contractually obligated. So if you would ask me an opinion about what happens next, I would love in the next round of negotiations for this to be a conversation. I don't know the answer. I don't know that what we did is the right solution for the long term, but kind of workshop groups, as we call them, pull-out groups for kids who struggle or need gaps kind of remediated, may need something additional to what the 45 minutes a day that we can offer. So that's the future.
Hi. So I also have a couple of thoughts. One, for the chronic absenteeism, I think it's interesting to look at some of those pieces of feedback that you've gotten from families, that, housing is an issue. Some of these certainly point to sort of the general theme of poverty being a barrier to access. And not allowing children to get the full education that they're deserving of. So I wonder, what initiatives the district could kind of do to work with the town around that and help people secure, steady housing and, address some of these issues that you can't deal with just by telling somebody it's important to come to school. And I think we all know that. But I do appreciate that, you're digging into this and you're asking people directly, what is the barrier for you and what do you need? Because I think that's definitely where it starts. And then for the combating hate and bias, I personally would not include sometimes in the positive category. I feel like that's the lowest bar ever. I think when we're asking why students, young teenagers or preteens, why aren't you stepping up to combat hate and bias when the adults around you aren't modeling it consistently? I think that that's probably your biggest issue. These kids are not going to step up to the plate and do work that isn't being shown to be of value, to be important, to be non-negotiable. So I personally would start there and focus on the adults.
I agree with you, and we do care deeply about the adults. The challenge with asking a question like this on an anonymous survey is, how much does a student think that the teacher heard or saw the thing that happened? And so they're going to say, never. No, she didn't. She was in the room. She heard it. She didn't do anything. When in fact, the teacher didn't hear it. So this is the challenge. I do think that we're actually doing a very good job of modeling that when we see it, when we hear it, in situations that when 2 administrators walk in the room after something happened, it's because it's that serious. And for why the students aren't doing, it's because it's terrifying. It's terrifying to go against your peer who you've played lacrosse with for 5 years, or you've gone to, religious school with for 10 years. That's really scary. And so it's building them up to know that you can do this, and all of us do this on a regular basis. So I appreciate your comments, Rebeccah, because they're true. and we're trying to hold both of those things. How do you model this for kids, and how do you embolden kids to take action?
Any comments from this side of the table? I've been staring at you for 3 minutes, and then you raise your hand when I look away.
Just enjoying your gaze.
Andrew.
This is on chronic absenteeism, and it's more of a comment of encouragement, because we've heard a lot about chronic absenteeism over the last few years and know that it's important to track whether people are in their classes, but I've been really bothered by the fact that we're focusing on whether they're in their classes. Because a lot of the absenteeism isn't because kids are out at the local pool hall hustling games. What they're doing is lots of other issues, and a lot of the absenteeism comes from other real issues. So I'm going to thank you for looking beyond that. It's more than just the tally of whether they're in the seats. It's more of why they're not there. And I think that it's not only being aware of their situations and treating them with respect, but it's also encouraging communication between the parents who are ultimately responsible for the kids to be there, than just saying, oh, you missed 11 days, I don't care why, here's a nasty gram from us. So thank you for looking beyond that, I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate all the data in this, as well as the stories that go with it. And I think my one thought as you're talking about the Tier 2 experiment is, as we start looking at restructuring, maybe that's another angle we look at that from. What are the possibilities?
All right. My comments have mostly been addressed already. I wrote down, after you talked about the small group instruction, is this a Tier 2 intervention? And then, of course, we identified it as a Tier 2 intervention, and we know as we went through our budget process this year, we are starting to impact our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions for our students. So this is not just a teacher contract issue. This is the ability to fully fund our schools in a way that we can provide the services to all the students who need them. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Jim, because I think it's a really tangible reality of what we're facing in terms of trouble, financial trouble in the district. So I might even incorporate it in some of the public speaking that I do over the next few months to advocate for our budget, both this year and next. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, moving on. We have a presentation from Joe Costello, who is joining us from the District Management Group to talk about the strategic reorganization project that we've got. So I'm going to let Peter sort of kick off how we got to this. Joe, you are welcome to come up to the table and get yourself comfortable while Peter gets your presentation going and does a little lead in for us.
Yeah, so while Joe is getting settled, and welcome, Joe, I'll just give a bit of an overview. So, as you know, a couple months ago now, we released a request for proposals to secure a strategic consultant to help us with a strategic plan, as well as options for reorganization of the district, because we just don't have the resources anymore to do the things we need to in as many places as we currently do. So we need to think a little bit differently. We recognize the confluence of, fiscal restraints that we have, as well as declining enrollment. Just really thinking about, the emerging needs that we've seen among student populations, and thinking about how, looking forward, we can continue to serve the students that we're seeing in our schools within the means of the community. And I think that's something that's going to be really important to be able to tackle. So we know that's going to be extraordinarily complex, so we needed to bring in a consultant to help us with that work. So we released a request for proposals. We had an interview team of about 15 people who went through all proposals that were submitted, identified 3 finalists. We then convened another group of about 12 individuals, I think, and that to do some interviews of our 3 finalists that we selected. And, I was pleased, both Adam and Tori, I know, are going to be working on the steering committee, so they joined us for those interviews. And then thank you to Mike Balalescu and Amy Maciel, President and Vice President of ABEA. We also brought in for the interviews so that we had an educator voice listening to all 3 proposals as well. And through that, district management group really emerged as the preferred consultant to bring in. We have had experience in the past with district management group and very, very positive experience as well. But I think their presentation and focus really stood out to us, particularly in the interview process. It was clear that they understood what we needed and what we were working on in ways that some of the other consultants maybe through the interview process just didn't quite get to. In particular, a couple consultants focused a lot on GIS and mapping systems of knowing where your students are in the community and its relation to schools, which just really didn't really hit home with a lot of the interview team. So we're really thrilled to be working with District Management Group. I'm going to let Zhou take it from here, introduce himself, and tell you a little bit about their proposal, the work they're intending to do, and some of their team.
Clicker works for me. And can you hear me? Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Superintendent Light, for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. As you've heard, my name is Zhou Costello. I'm a director on the consulting team at District Management Group. A little bit about my background, just very quickly. I'm from the greater Boston area originally. Our organization, though, works with school districts all across the United States. I'll have a little bit more about that in a moment. My background also before DM Group, I was a high school teacher out in Las Vegas, Nevada, so that's really where I got my start in public education, really developed my passion for public education. And I'd say more so how to make those systems of public education work a little bit better. It's been a privilege working with DM Group and so excited for the opportunity to work with you all and learn a little bit more about the needs of Acton-Boxborough and how we can think through strategic planning and reorganization to, again, make the district work a little bit better. In terms of my time with you all, 3 main objectives. I want to give a quick background on our organization. I know some of you know a little bit about who we are, but for those of you who are less familiar or those listening at home, want to give just a quick background about our organization. Then I'll provide a brief overview of our scope of work and the deliverables and sort of what you can expect throughout the process. And then, of course, provide some space at the end of this session for any questions or comments that folks may have. So with that, here we go. So as I mentioned, we're based in Boston, Massachusetts. We've been around for over 20 years, and we work with school districts all across the United States. So we've had the distinct pleasure of working with districts in Massachusetts, but again, across 35 states, hundreds of districts, thousands of schools and district leaders, millions of students supported. And one of the great things through that experience that we have found is that school districts can learn a lot from different from one another, from different states, from different communities, and we can really bring some of those emerging best practices together to really support school districts as they think about what the next 5, 10, 15 years might look like. In terms of what our organization is all about, our mission really is to achieve systemic improvement in public education, starting with a relentless focus on student outcomes, doing what is best for students, but then thinking about how you design a system around supporting students so that you can really achieve systemic lasting improvements. And really without the combination of relentless focus on student outcomes, educational best practices, but thinking about how you're using your resources, how you're designing your organizations. Without doing all 3 of those things, it's really hard to make that systemic lasting change. So it's really with that lens we approach our work in public education. There are all sorts of different branches to our organization. Our work is really going to be focused on that DM consulting portion. As Superintendent Light mentioned, we have had a wonderful history over the last 5, 6 years or so through various partnerships with you all. First and foremost, as a member of our District Management Council organization that brings school district leaders from across the country together for different professional learning opportunities. We also had the privilege of partnering with you all in a social emotional behavioral opportunity review back in 2019. And you all have been using our DM schedule software for special education. So we are very privileged to know a little bit about your organization already. So in terms of our work ahead of us for the strategic planning and reorganizational consulting, there are really 5 phases of work that are going to really shape this partnership. So the first is convening a steering committee, bringing a group of leaders together to really think through what the design of the effort is going to be, and then from there conduct a really thorough diagnostic. So digging into quantitative and qualitative information to get a really deep understanding of the specific needs of the community, hosting a variety of different stakeholder engagement sessions, really learning from different stakeholders within the community about what the greatest needs are, understanding the facilities, understanding what's working, what's not working, et cetera, and then using the learnings from all of those various engagements to create an initial draft of a strategic plan and then generate some district reorganization scenarios. And then once we bring those initial drafts back to the steering committee, make some modifications based on preliminary feedback and suggestions, then we'll go back to the community to gather feedback on those proposed scenarios. So the goal here is to really have two different phases of stakeholder engagement, both to generate input, generate that initial input, making sure we're hearing from diverse representative corners of the community, and then workshopping the learnings from all of that engagement, and then going back to the community to really get deep feedback on the various options that have bubbled up to really be the best options for the district to move forward with. And then once we incorporate that feedback, we'll be able to share that final plan and set of recommendations that's been workshopped with that steering committee back to district leadership through the steering committee, but then also back to the school committee more broadly. And then from there, set you up on a path for implementation, making sure that there are very clear action steps for how you take a set of options and a strategic plan and convert that into meaningful change for your community. I have two additional slides here that I just want to show that kind of ground us in our approach to both strategic planning and then how to use the strategy from that plan to really bring about change. So what you're looking at here is our district management group strategic planning framework. So one branch of our organization, DM Learning we call it, does extensive research within the realm of public education and really how to make transformative change within public education. So this is the framework that we use to really design that strategy and use it to inform then the options for district reorganization. So starting with that mission and vision, using the thinking there to design a theory of action, right? The fundamental beliefs around what will bring about change and why the different actions will yield the benefits that you're hoping for. And then using that strategy to inform specific priority areas with very specific actionable measurable goals, and then use that to then design implementation around what your specific initiatives are and various action steps. So this is the framework that we use with districts all across the country related to strategic planning. And we'll be excited to engage to use this framework with you all as we engage in the strategic planning aspect of the work. The other framework that I wanted to share with you all is how you then use that strategy to plan to manage change effectively, to allow for that change to really take root within your community. So this is our change management framework, which is based on a few different change management frameworks that are out there. But again, thinking about how you take what can be a fairly abstract idea around how you might improve public education and think about what the various steps might need to be in order to take those ideas and allow that change to take root. So there's a lot more information behind this that we'll get into at various points throughout our engagement together, but I just wanted to share this just to ground our work in some of the theory behind both strategic planning and change management. In terms of how we're going to measure success, this is work that we do with districts all across the country, and we are very careful to monitor success all throughout the process. So a few key points here. One of the top ones, I think, for our work with you all is going to be the scope and volume of stakeholder engagement. We have a variety of measures that we use to that point to make sure that the stakeholder engagement that we're conducting really does represent the various diverse perspectives of community members, particularly those community members who may not always get a seat at the table. We want to make sure that we're engaging all of the various community members so it truly is representative. Whenever we present specific opportunities or options, we'll always clarify the specific benefits of those opportunities, really weighing the pros and cons, evaluating the financial impact of various operational recommendations. And then ultimately, we want something that is worthwhile and actionable for you all. So a key measure of success for us is building consensus with the steering committee, guiding coalition, if you will, all along the way so that when we present that final set of options, we're able to build consensus around that strategic plan and ultimately have a successful ratification of whatever those recommendations may be. In the end, though, two key deliverables that we'll be providing to you all, which is a written strategic plan that is focused, results-oriented, and really grounded in the needs and perspectives of your community. And then from that strategic plan, really using that strategic plan as the architecture for district reorganization, 2 to 3 reorganizational options that are grounded in effective and efficient school environments that you all can then consider for how you might make some of these potential changes moving forward. And it's really those key deliverables that will serve as the conclusion of our work together. Where we go from here, we'll be connecting with Superintendent Light and his team really in the coming weeks or so to really get this work off the ground, start to plan out what some of that stakeholder engagement, both the preliminary diagnostic phase of stakeholder engagement and that re-engagement in the fall, so we can really get this work going. And with that, I'll turn things over for any specific questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Joe. Questions, comments from the committee? Vikram, then Becca.
Hi, thanks. That's a great presentation. I have some, can you show some examples of where you've implemented change and what that change has looked like and what the improvements have been? Maybe 1 or 2 examples?
Yeah.
Given the time, I mean, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to clarify.
Just to get a sense of like examples of what you have done that the outcome has changed and what actually changed to create those outcomes.
Yeah, gosh, are you interested in like strategic planning type work, or
well, I mean,
all of the above?
Just something, I guess, sort of congruent to what is expected to take place here.
It's a great question. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what the best example to share with you might be. A recent project I did, this was 3 or 4 years ago, we worked with this mid-sized urban district here in New England, and we worked with them basically on school restructuring. It started with their budget office because they had lost, I think, gosh, they had lost about 10% of their students over the course of 5 to 10 years, and we worked with them to think through what the right set of options would be to, in this case, they had a number of schools that were quite outdated, and so they ended up consolidating some of their schools and shifting some programs around. That was one example of where we were able to help them reallocate their staff and ultimately shift staff to programs. And it's kind of interesting to hear you talk about the Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Through the work that we did with them, they were able to free up staff to offer more of those Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. So that's one example. Another example, we worked with a district, one of my most recent projects actually, a district here in Massachusetts in Central Mass, working with them to understand their true financial picture. Through that work, we were able to create a really thorough narrative for how the district is currently managing their resources, so they were able to go back to their town and successfully pass an override to say, hey, you know, you entrust us with your precious tax dollars. We want to make sure that you feel that we're spending those tax dollars really effectively. So the end product there was a really clear, articulated narrative for how they're currently spending their resources, so that they could then go back to their community to argue for additional resources.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Rebeccah, and then back to Ben.
Hi. Hi here. I was going to ask if you had experience with more rural and like suburban districts, because I think maybe things are changing, but it does feel like we're sort of like on the edge of like rural-esque, or at least when I tell people I'm from Acton, they're like, wow, that's the sticks. So it sounds like you do have a range of experience, urban and you know, and I know Las Vegas pretty well. My uncle lives there, so that's a good place to cut your teeth for sure. Now, I guess my real question is, what sort of value you place on, you know, more qualitative data, speaking directly to students and staff who would be impacted by the changes or have been impacted by changes that have been implemented by your group in the past in other areas. And then I also kind of want to raise a bit of a flag for people about, I guess, the CEO and founders, just listed in here, the Transforming Education Through Social Entrepreneurship course that he taught at Harvard. I just wonder sort of like how that philosophy comes into play, partnering with businesses and communities or nonprofits and communities. I'm sort of interested in how that vision affects maybe like the work that your group does. How holistically, I guess, within a community are you looking, and what sort of like outsourcing of things might you be interested in doing, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Because I guess that's the sort of red flag I have is like, trying to improve public transportation by cutting funding and privatizing it, that sort of thing I worry about.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so first question, qualitative information, paramount in this kind of work, right? Ultimately, our approach is placing students and staff members first in understanding what their greatest needs are, because you can't make any kind of meaningful change in a public school system without thinking about what's best for kids and listening to students, listening to staff members, listening to family members. So that is going to be a central part of our effort with you all. And something I will say we will rely heavily on the steering committee for in terms of making sure that we are talking to the right people, because we come in with our plan for stakeholder engagement, but obviously we're outsiders, even though we're a few miles down the road in Boston. We don't know your community as well as you do, and so we will partner with district leaders to make sure that we're talking to the right mixes of people. So first question there. Second question is just great. I mean, I'm sure John's going to be watching this later. It's a fantastic question. I have had the opportunity to sit in on a lot of John's classes, and I would say his approach is how can we think differently about how we're operating our school districts. I think one of the classes that one of the lectures that he teaches or case studies that he does is on the Baltimore City Public Schools, which is all about how they shifted how they do their school-based budgets, so that rather than the district making the budgets for all of the schools, they push resources down to the schools to really empower school leaders to make the right kinds of decisions for their organizations. So that's really the lens that he takes. Ultimately, the recommendations that we will generate are going to come from the community and sprinkled in with our experience with other school districts. So our plan is not to bring in subcontractors or anything like that for any of that. I don't know.
I can actually give a good example too of maybe more of what I've seen John do. So John was actually the person who introduced us to the founders of Cartwheel Care. And so that certainly wasn't to replace any of our staff, because they're providing a service that our staff don't. But we were able to partner them in a very cost-effective way, because the vast majority of the cost is actually through students' health insurance, and then supplementally funded through kind of contingency funds so that anyone can actually access the service. So I think maybe that's a better example of what I've seen John doing in some of that social entrepreneurship course.
I think that's a really great example, and something that I know I personally have used and is a great sort of, what's the word? Implementation? I don't know, connection to the school system.
Yeah.
I also, thank you for that response. I think it's actually really, I think it's powerful that you actually have sat in on his classes and have, experienced him in that sense also. I think that that's really great.
So thank you for coming out here tonight from the city of Boston. One of the concerns that our community has is the closure of one particular school, I think, has gone around within our community. In looking at your slide deck earlier, I noticed that you had the city of Boston as one of your clients, the Boston Public Schools.
Yeah.
For those of you who may not know or be following the news in town, the city of Boston is closing 4 schools: the Dever Elementary School in Dorchester, the Community Academy in JP, the Excel High School in Southie, and the Mary Lyon Pilot High School in Brighton. Did your organization make any recommendations to close those schools? And were they part of the decision-making, not decision-making, but the recommendations going to the school committee who then voted on that?
No, we supported Boston with their strategic plan maybe 10 years ago. We had no part to play in that effort with them.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So I have a question, I tend to focus a little bit on the financial piece.
Yeah.
And in a lot of situations with restructuring, there's a sort of bigger upfront cost than one might expect. Would you say that that is more often the case? And if so, is there like a range that you would typically see with, like obviously there will be savings over time, but in order to get to those savings, we need this additional capital at the beginning?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. It's hard to give you a range because it varies so dramatically based on which options you want to pursue. Like if what you're doing is just shifting programming within your buildings and you're like regrouping programs to have a slightly more efficient sort of configuration, your startup cost might be pretty negligible. Whereas some other ones where it's like, okay, actually if we like are gonna really do this right, we need to knock down some walls and like push some things out, like that would be a little bit heftier. I'm struggling to give you like firm numbers there because I've worked with districts doing this work where it was really just shifting people around, which, they were able to, because they were regrouping students and staff members, they were able to run their programs a little bit more efficiently, so they were able to actually save costs and then repurpose some of those staff members for some of these really important initiatives that have been really hard to run historically. Whereas in other schools, or other districts, they're like, in order for us to like really do this well, we need another facility here. And what came through this process is that in order for us to do this right, this is what our facilities really need to look like. And so let's put ourselves on the right path to work with state organizations to get the funding that we need to build a new facility, something along those lines. So probably a very unsatisfying answer.
But at least it points to, the different options and that it's something that you are considering and would be proposing as well.
Yeah,
so, thank you.
Absolutely. I would say in our set of like findings and our work with you, we will be extremely clear about what we believe the financial implications of each option, so that as you're weighing the different options, and maybe we give you 3 options and you decide on the 4th option where you kind of mix them all together, you'll have a really clear understanding of what the potential financial implications of those options would be.
Yeah. Leela, then Yenshin.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question and then a comment, so I'll pause after my question. Could you share a little bit more about your approach to making sure that we are reaching folks who kind of haven't historically been at the table, to be able to get the diverse and representative feedback that you mentioned? Because I imagine that the steering committee, though great, won't be connected to many pockets that are super important to get. And so I'm curious what the approach is there.
Yeah, terrific question. The way we typically approach it, we'll do almost like a social networking type map to understand the various communities within both of your towns here. And then from there, we map basically the best ways to engage with various communities. So to give you an example, I worked with a large urban district in Nebraska that had a surprisingly, a very diverse community. And what we found is that there was a group of recent immigrant students and families who the district was having a really hard time engaging with. And so we ended up partnering through the school district with one of the immigration agency services within the city, and they were able to give us access pretty much to some of their parent liaisons and things like that. So essentially our approach, we once we identify the various groups that we're struggling to connect with, we work with liaisons who might have better access to some of those groups. And so usually that means going beyond the steering committee and finding other folks either within the school district organization or beyond, different community partners who may have better access to those community groups.
I appreciate that relational approach. And then kind of not connected to what I just asked, I saw around the metrics of how are we going to collect data, things around APs and reading and math proficiency and thinking about college readiness. And then I'm also just thinking about how do we accurately pick up on the pieces around how students are feeling about their experience in our schools. And I know that it can be tougher to get at that data, but I'm hoping that this process will craft kind of desired outcomes and metrics that more holistically look at what student success looks like or what makes a school experience successful. And I'll just end by saying a community member had reached out about some of what they read and said that data informs the process and we can't make good decisions for all of our students without all of the information. And I feel like that hits home on some of how I'm feeling about this. But I'm looking forward to working with you. Thanks.
Hi. My question is also about the community stakeholder engagement. So Acton-Boxborough is unique in a way that we have a lot of family members who are from different countries. So their education experience is very, very different from folks who grew up here. It's very interesting. I'm just curious, like, do you guys have any experience working with communities as such? Because for me, I grew up in another country, like, my parents didn't have a say in how I was being educated. Where here, you're basically asking people to stay engaged and, you have a say in your kids' education. Like, how do you, encourage people who never knew I could have a say in my kids' education to participate in this engagement and process?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. First part of your question, yes, we have experience working with similar districts, with similar communities. And the approach that we typically take is creating a really thoughtful communication and outreach campaign that starts with really clear, easy to understand communication around what the engagement is, how community members can engage throughout the process, what all of those sort of clear milestones are within that process. We would work with the school district to make sure we're translating resources into the appropriate languages, to make sure that we're reaching all the various pockets of the community. And then I'd say throughout the process as well, we're carefully monitoring our results to make sure that if we have surveys or if we have various touch points with different community different community groups, we're getting the response rates that would reflect that we're getting the engagement that we would be hoping for. And then if we're not, we course correct very quickly to re-engage and make sure that we're doing that really intentional outreach with various groups. But I think having that thread of a really strong communication campaign running all the way through so that it's not like, oh, Joe Costello presented at the board meeting or the school committee meeting on April 17th and like that's it, we're not going to talk about it until like October. We would never, obviously would never do that. We have a lot of different touch points. It's constantly being blasted out so that we can make sure that we're engaging with all the various diverse corners of the community.
Thank you, Joe. I have just two quick comments. One is that I just want to highlight for everybody, one of the things when we were interviewing that stuck out to me was DMG's knowledge of our open enrollment system, which is somewhat unique. The fact that you're based here in Massachusetts and understand some of the challenges we're facing around Chapter 70 funding and the real intricacies there, I think those spoke to me really well. And then the other part that that really spoke to me was in the presentation and the work that I've seen from DMG, your ability to handle both the big picture strategic visioning, which is really got to be the underpinning of the work that we're doing, but then your ability to go real deep and deliver those breakthrough results at the ground level with our students and with our teachers. So I think that your ability to sort of balance both of those was super important and stood out. And then the only other comment that I would make is to you that you've just seen the sort of the input from this committee, and I want to commend my committee for your interest and participation in this. This is a super important topic for us, and I just want to say how proud I am of the committee to have provided you with some really good feedback and questions, and let's hope that we get that same level of participation from the rest of our community, but I think you've got a fun project ahead of you, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be able to work with you. My team is thrilled. Looking forward to continued conversations to really dig into these important topics.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move on to new business. The first is some proposed changes to a number of policies that are Title IX related. Shall I hand it over to Andrew to speak quickly about this?
Yes, thank you. So a reminder to the committee, you might recall that earlier in the school year in the fall, we brought forward to you proposed changes to a number of policies that relate to Title IX regulations. The impetus for that was that during the Biden administration, there were changes to the scope and definitions that were used within Title IX. And so once those were made, then those trickle to, obviously, organizations to which it applies, including us. So we worked with legal counsel to then adapt all of the policies that were affected by it. And so then we brought that to you and we changed it. Then, obviously, things changed at the federal level with the new administration, along with a court decision and this new administration's areas of emphasis. There were new changes made to Title IX where basically they wanted to revert back to pre-Biden administration definitions that were developed in the first Trump presidency. So with that, and I'll just provide you a very brief description, a lot of it is really around defining what is a protected class, specifically gender identity. So gender identity has been removed as a protected class as part of Title IX. And so in terms of the scope of what a Title IX case would involve, that is probably the most substantive change that I would present to you. And so there's that piece. What I do want to share with everybody, if there are concerns about that piece from an implementation standpoint in our district, we have other policies and procedures that have to do with bullying and harassment that do incorporate gender identity as a protected class. And so if there are situations of concern within that realm, there's still avenues to address that and be responsive in the way that we would want to be. It just certainly wouldn't be categorized as a Title IX case. It would just be categorized under other procedures that we have. So I do want to present that to all of you. It just wouldn't be Title IX. So what I present to you tonight is probably logistically simple, but perhaps emotionally or otherwise elicit other thoughts. But just in terms of the actual technical request, the request is that you make a motion to revert the language in those stated policies to the original language that was in place prior to our changes in the fall of 2024.
Liz, do you have anything to add? No. Okay. Nothing at this time. Any questions or comments from the committee on this? Leela.
Yeah, just quickly, I think I understand that we have to do this, and so I'm not suggesting that we don't pass it. Number one, I think we feel some protection being in Massachusetts under this federal administration, and this is the real impact of some of these shifts at the federal level. I think also, number two, personally having a hard time with this because, funny enough, a Title IX case under the last Trump administration is why I got into policy, because those shifts were so significant. And so I look forward to working with the school district around like how we keep protecting students. But here we are, folks. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right, so is there a motion to revert the policy language for policy AC, policy ACAB, and policy JIE that existed prior to the approved changes voted on November 24th, 2024 in order to comply with the current Title IX regulations and policies?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Liz made the motion and Ginny seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
I'll abstain. All right, so we have Ben, Yenshin, and Becca abstaining. And you're abstaining too, sorry. I've been so used to looking at this side of the table all night. And I'm just going to check around the room. The rest? All right, Vikram is abstaining. So I'm going to need someone to help me with the Roberts rules. An abstention is neither in favor or against. So as long as we have a majority of the folks who haven't abstained to be in favor of this, it passes. What am I going to do without you, Ginny? All right. So one last time, I'll go around the room very quickly. Tori was a yay. Andrew was a yay. Leela was an abstention. Andrew's going to abstain as well. So now I'm just going to roll call vote. Tori.
Not a happy yes.
Andrew.
Abstain.
Leela.
Abstain.
Liz.
Harvard can afford to say no to federal funding. We can't. Yay.
I'll say yes.
I have to abstain.
Rebeccah abstains. Ginny?
With disgust, I am voting yes.
Yanshin?
Abstain.
Ben?
Abstain.
And Vikram?
Abstain.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Next on is Policy JK, which is the second read of our revised student discipline guidelines and student behavior policy. Liz, do you want to give us just an update of the changes that were made since the last time we saw this, and maybe we'll have some discussion following that?
Yes, primarily the changes that you're seeing are around the language concerning the right to recess. And I want to, I know that we have heard a lot of feedback on that, particularly with the clause that's about restorative justice. I had written this down for Beth. I'm sorry, I'm completely veering from what I wrote, so bear with me. I'm just going to go off sort of feeling and instinct here, because I did want to explain sort of the intent around that. Our goal in creating this language in the policy was to create sort of the right for recess as we could, and also allow for flexibility. One example that we heard was of a teacher who, may need to talk to a student alone away from the classroom, maybe for 2 minutes. And really the only opportunity that teacher may have to talk to, this second grader, whether that's to check in, whether it's to provide additional support, is, having them wait for the first 2 minutes of recess. So while we fundamentally agree that recess is vital for our students, we're also hoping to avoid unintentionally hindering the opportunities for these students to be supported in the ways that they may need by their educators. So in sort of respect to that as well, we also included that second piece for the checks and balances, where if there's going to be any, with limitations around that student having access to the full recess period, an administrator needs to be involved. This is not something, we were looking to avoid any potential for, punitive, stay in and copy lines for recess. Not that I'm saying any of our educators would do that. It's just, sort of going back to things that my parents have told me that they experienced in their educations as well. I also wanted to take a moment and personally thank elementary principals Tricia O'Reilly and Christina Gavin, and also Amanda Bailey for the discussion, input, and collaboration on this policy. We really, really appreciate you guys giving us your time as well.
All right, thank you. Questions?
Yeah, Adam, can I just also mention in service of what Liz said, I also, Tricia, who was part of it, is here because I do think what's helpful is to give, to be able to answer questions either from the committee or that Tricia thinks that might be useful in terms of just offering a bit more contour in terms of how we understand or how they understand kind of the moments in which they may need to sort of consider sort of weighing kind of how they might use that time, because I totally appreciate some of the comments that were made around concerns, and so I do wonder if providing a bit more scope and scale around when those moments might happen might be useful as well. So
sure.
So Tricia's here as well for that piece.
Tricia, I have a question for you already, so you might as well come up and get comfy. So I'll start off by saying I appreciate the work that the subcommittee did to sort of formalize this. I also recognize some of the feedback that we've gotten. My question, I hope, is quite simple, which is to say, if a restorative exercise were called for, and recess were not a time that it would be performed, where might there be other times in the school day that could happen?
Academic time would be the primary pull. We really try to never pull kids out of specials because specials happen so infrequently. And there's always a possibility, depending on what time a child actually arrives at the building, that maybe we could get a couple minutes in, but that is highly dependent on family schedules and buses that day, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you. Rebeccah.
Hi. I wonder if you'd agree with me that the issue really comes down to, because nobody wants to take recess away from a child. I don't believe any teacher in this district feels that way. We all know that everybody has the right to a break and that fresh air is good. I think you'd probably agree with me, I suspect, that the issue is funding. We do not have enough assistants. We do not have enough bodies and boots on the ground in order to get those 2 minutes. Because, yes, academic time, but, the real issue is when there's one teacher and 20 some odd kids in a room and you've got one kid that's dysregulated, having to figure that out. And, it's not getting any easier, certainly.
I agree with you, Rebeccah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a comment, because Becca just asked my question. I think it's very interesting that when you guys came to speak to us during the subcommittee meeting, bright and early on a Friday morning, I think people perhaps do not know what a principal's life is like in the building these days. I think you guys are probably on every educator's speed dial, like there's something going on, you're the firefighter. Like Becca said, it's not that we wish to take anything away from anyone, but I think we need to recognize that educators, as well as administrators, are human beings too. They have to do what they have to do, right?
Yeah, I don't know an educator who will take recess away from a child in a punitive way. I really don't. When I knew I was going to have an opportunity to speak here, I did a quick survey of my staff. I said, I'm going to go talk to school committee. I said, in the last month, just tell me how many times anybody in the building has taken any time away from students. And 68% of the teachers said, in the last month, I've never done it. For the smaller percentage of students, teachers that took away time, I asked them how much, and it was 1 or 2 minutes, or 2 to 5 minutes. And I think the greatest was in 6th grade, the upper grades, where it was 5 to 10 minutes. In the upper grades, our teachers have very, very little in their toolbox, really, in terms of that kind of flexibility, and it is because of funding. And frankly, it's also because we've changed our thinking on recess over the decades. When I was a brand new teacher and you forgot your homework, it was pretty common that you stayed in until you finished your homework. That doesn't happen anymore, and frankly, if it does, I think it's an issue that needs to be brought up to the classroom teacher and to the administrator. I think that our teachers know that kids need to be outside. Our teachers of younger students have actually a little bit more, a few more options, because they tend to have schedules set up where there might be a choice time during the classroom time, or there might be a fun Friday on a Friday afternoon where kids get to pick and choose things, and perhaps something that needs to be finished or something that needs a little more attention can happen during that time. Teachers aren't taking away time from kids because they can't finish it. It's because they are disrupting somebody else from finish it, because they are getting up and walking away. When I speak with a teacher about not having the opportunity to even use recess, they say, so blindfold us and put tie our hands behind our back, because anybody who's raised kids know that there has to be some sort of natural consequence. And what we're talking about when we talk about taking away recess is a couple minutes. I just had a meeting yesterday with my assistants who wanted to talk about recess. They supervise the playground. And they said to me, so, what do we do when the kids don't listen to us? What do we do when somebody says, shut up to us? This is everyday stuff. I said, you say to the child, come here, you're going to stand next to me for 2 minutes while the rest of your friends play, and then after 2 minutes, you can go back and play with them, because that's not acceptable behavior on the playground. I stand by that. We have to have standards for behavior, and we have to have standards for expectations and for respect, and we're not angry at that child, we're not being punitive, but there has to be a natural consequence for behavior in order for behavior to change, when it can. And I'm not suggesting that students who have recognized, diagnosed disabilities or behavior concerns, that's not what I'm talking about. Our general education students who need to know what the rules are. You know, we had a lot of rain last week. I can't tell you how many times we told kids to stay out of the puddles. And finally, the same kids kept going to the puddles. I've been like, guess what? You can't go on the grass. Now you have to stand up. You know, there have to be natural consequences. And I think recess is just one of those opportunities. And I was the one who said at that meeting, you know, a 6th grade teacher needs to talk to a student privately because you know, it's respectful. As the kids are going out to recess and you say, just stay back a minute, I need to talk to you about something, you know, that's the only kind of thing that we're really talking about. Kids who are purposely not completing assignments in class need to know that they have a responsibility to get some of the work done. No one has had their entire recess taken away. This year in my school, I'm going to say, I don't know about every other school, but I just kind of picked the survey as a random sample, or picked the school as a random sample, and teachers had really strong feelings about it. They also need for the community to trust their professional judgment. And I trust their professional judgment. I think most parents trust their professional judgment. And if there is a problem, it's my job as principal to correct the problem. It's a parent's job as a parent to ask questions about it if things aren't, you know, working the way they're supposed to, or if their child is being harmed in some way. But to say we can never, ever take anything away from them, it really is, it's taking away a professional judgment that I don't think the teachers deserve. Because I think they've proven that they're actually handling this appropriately and developmentally the way it should be handled.
Thank you. Tori.
I appreciate the research that you did on this, especially because if I had to go on the end of experiences of kids I know, and granted this is some years out of date, I'm aware of one who lost recess for an entire week. Mm-hmm. And that's a kid with a pretty significant IEP. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it hasn't happened in the past, and I'm glad to hear that it isn't happening now. I'm wondering a little bit about the language that we have in here, because the conversation I'm hearing and what you're describing is not how I read this at all. When I read restorative exercise, I'm thinking about my experience with my own school, which uses CPS, collaborative problem solving, and that would be a 20-minute exercise. In fact, in some cases, it might be a little longer because some of our kids need a lot of help walking through that. And as I thought about that, we're pretty careful about when we schedule those, because you need to get a kid at the right time to have those conversations, and a preferred activity is generally not it. And also recognizing we're taking away your general education assistants, we're taking staff, and we're asking you to share across schools. We are not making this easy, I get that. So one of my wonderings is, this language only talks about restorative exercises and recess, and I get it that we're talking about right to recess, but do we have somewhere in our policies that talks about just how we give you the ability as educators to make the right choice for the kid, the educators involved in that moment at that time? And that might be an Andrew question, because you probably know the policies better than.
So you're asking, is there an explicit policy that sort of codifies that sort of educators and school-based leaders have the sort of discretion to?
Yeah, that it's not just recess is the only place we talk about this, because that's how I read this, is the only possible option is recess.
Yeah, no, I think that came out of the in my experience, that came out of the conversation of what would be the reasons why kids might be missing some recess, and restorative practice is one. So let me just try to give you a couple examples to help. I had an incident on the playground recently where one student was being really unkind to another student and really taking advantage of the fact that the student didn't understand he was being unkind to him. And when it came to my attention, I called the parent. I did all the sort of traditional things you think you might do when a kid gets in trouble. But then I said to him, how are we going to repair this? And frankly, one of the things he was saying was he was getting the other child to say that the child was gay, and the child didn't really understand what that meant. And so I had a long conversation with this child about, with the student who did it, about how that other child might feel. And I said, how do you think we're going to repair this? And what we decided was that the child who did the harm was actually going to spend some structured time during the school day playing a preferred game that the other child had. Sorry, I can't do it with the names. In other words, some forced time together to understand and appreciate each other a little bit. So that actually happened during the school day. And then I said to him, now what about the fact that you just made fun of someone being gay? What about all the other kids who heard it? And he said, well, I don't think there's anybody else in the 6th grade who's gay. I said, well, I'm going to tell you something. There's 75 kids in the 6th grade. I guarantee you somebody there is having some thoughts or some questions about their identity. And he goes, oh, I never thought of that. I said, yeah, so what are we going to do about that? He decided he was going to make posters on his own time, and the posters say, it's okay to be gay, and they are up all over the 6th grade right now that he made. And that was my interpretation, as much as we can, to embrace restorative justice. There was repair done with the child where there was direct harm, and there was repair done with the community in the way that the child could do that. In that instance, we didn't use a minute of recess. We didn't have to. In another instance, I had a couple of kids go into the bathroom and purposefully do some damage, and that required an enormous amount of cleaning. And they thought it was funny, which never helps a situation. And so I had a discussion with them. I had a discussion with the custodian, and we decided that they were going to take 10 minutes of their recess the next time they had recess, and they were going to help the custodian in the building, not clean the bathroom, but just recognize that the harm that they did, the repair they needed to make, was to this person who now had much more work to get done during the school day because of their choices, and they did, and they understood why they were doing that. So that's a long-winded answer, and I apologize. The point is that the restorative component was when we were having that conversation at the subcommittee. I believe, if I remember, Andrew, when we were having the conversation, I said those are sometimes the only time we have to do that. So.
Yeah, absolutely get that. And I guess what I'm just saying is that Tori Campbell reading this policy, the way it's written, makes me think that the only time we do restorative exercises is during recess. So it's probably a language thing, but that was my takeaway when I read this. So that's where I got stuck. Thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you. You know, they said in The Godfather, they come after what you love, and kids love recess, and it's an important part. And I wonder if you have an opinion on the thoughtfulness of any kind of recess restriction, because pulling recess for restorative activity or any other activity is a heavy switch to flip. I'm aware of groups of students who've had their recess restricted, and knowing how little time they have for free time in school, I'm concerned about the consequence of this being pulled too quickly. I have 4 children, and I know my patience dies quickly. I have seen schools deal with difficult actions from kids, ranging from slamming dustpans on the table during lunch to using bullhorns to other actions that have come down. And in some cases, it's easy to flip when you have this heavy power, because as with many punitive actions, and restricting recess is a punitive action, even with a restorative side to it. Some guidelines or training or processes or guardrails should be explained to those who wield that power of assessing those actions to get to the point of doing it. So what might we see? What do you think we should do as a way of harnessing the wielding of this power? Because there's great responsibility that comes with it.
I'm going to step in, Andrew, because the second half of the paragraph, and it took me a couple reads on this as well, the second half of the paragraph says it must be an administrator. It says, in such cases, this decision would only be made by a school administrator, and an alternative means of physical activity and social engagement should be provided. So I think it's clear there that says if this is happening, then you have to have an administrator involved. It's not the playground monitor, it's not the classroom teacher who makes that choice.
And even with that administrator, my question comes to the guardrails, or the process or the escalation that would be presented to that administrator? Are we just saying to the administrator, go ahead? Or are we saying that there's any other type of way of doing it?
I think
It's more about the question of, to the general populace, if it's frustration that pulls it, because that's what I've seen in other schools here.
I hear what you're saying, and I think we're moving from policy to procedure at that point. So my question for the committee is going to be quite simple one. Do we feel like there's language here that's sufficient to vote the policy, or do we need to send this back to policy subcommittee and or have a larger discussion around this when we're not here to just approve the policy?
In that vein, I think I was wondering about maybe amending the language slightly to say, you know, that you wouldn't be taking away the entire recess period, because I think that's an important piece that people aren't hearing. They're thinking and I know recess is short, but still, you know, it's only a couple minutes, and if, you know, that is like a guideline that we stick to. And Andrew, I also think we need to have some balance where I do think we need to respect the professionals here and know that if people are overstepping in their power that they have, then it's up to us and Peter and the public to hold them accountable. It's same as if anything else happened, you know, anytime power is abused by somebody at the top, it's going to have to be, you know, a process for people. I think we have to trust the people that we've hired to be able to lead the schools. And I personally do, in all of my experience, and I know anecdotally we all have our own experiences, but I feel that the most important part to me is that the consequences of behavior match the behavior that was done. And I feel like that has been a really big push. I'm happy, I think, with those examples of restorative justice and also the sort of working definition that I think we're using of restorative justice, and making sure that, you know, students understand exactly why, you know, the consequences are coming. And I think timing, sometimes it does have to happen during recess, and largely, I think we all know, because of personnel difficulties.
All right, so I'm looking for a sense of the committee about whether we want to table this item and discuss it more in the future, or if someone is willing to make a motion on the revised policy in front of us. I think we need to discuss. Microphone. Ooh, hey.
I have some other things to say as well, but I mean, general in the sense of time, I think we really need to discuss this further. We had a long conversation about this last night at the CPAC meeting.
Yep.
And there's wording here, people are generally favorable towards it.
Let me just get around.
But there needs to be work to be done on this. Because the thing is, I think what's not coming across here, I want to say one thing here, is that people seem to miss, we used to have recess for an hour, it's 20 minutes now. Recess should be in the same category as food and going to the bathroom. It's a quintessential aspect of their day. To shaving 5 minutes is 25% of their recess.
All right, so we're going to table this topic for the
Yes,
future,
let's do
since
that.
it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to get a consensus on voting it, which is what I wanted to go to. So we will find time in our agendas in the last 4 meetings of the year to discuss this more. So thank you.
And I really look forward to the entire school committee providing some input for the policy sub, who has been working tirelessly on this and is really looking for some additional help.
Thank you. Thank you, Tricia. We're moving on. It's not about this?
I mean, it's just to clarify process. Is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
coming back to the full school committee, or is it going back to policy and then going to the school committee?
It sounds to me like it has to come in front of the whole school committee, because even though there is a process for the policy subcommittee to collect input, we had this in front of the committee once, we provided that input and then revise it and provide more input. It seems that the school committee as a whole wants to discuss this at length, so I think we need to bring it in front of the whole school committee. And that may mean that we don't get to other things that we need to get to on our agendas for the rest of this year.
Can I chime in on that? The only concern I have about that is an amendment that we make in a meeting may not have an opportunity to have our educators and administrators talk about the implications of how that actually impacts what they do. And I'm a little concerned about amending it on the floor, making a change without understanding the impact of that. So I would actually suggest if you're not comfortable moving it forward as it is, I think it should go back to policy sub, get feedback from committee members to policy sub, but then also be able to talk to some teachers and administrators about what the potential changes are before it comes back. And I know that puts a burden on policy sub, but I'm really concerned about
it's a fair comment. I think
intent and impact.
We'll have to find a balance. It may be that this has to come and get discussed as a committee and then go back and get polished in subcommittee. But it doesn't seem that the policy subcommittee is getting the feedback that they need and the input from the committee as a whole. And I agree. I think there needs to be further discussion around the full table. It needs to go back again and get polished and further input and then come back for a vote again. But it seems that we're not able to come to a consensus without a great deal of input, which is fine. It's an important policy to go through. I'm going to move us on to another important topic, which is in our ongoing business, which is the superintendent evaluation process. So I'm going to look first directly to our departing school committee members and tell you you're not out of the woods. You still get the joy of providing some input and evaluation on the superintendent's performance. An email will be coming out. An email will be coming out shortly from Julie with all of the information that we received last year but updated for this year. So there will be an update on the school committee and the school district and superintendent goals for the year, as well as his self-evaluation, Peter's self-evaluation on that. And then you will also get a copy of the superintendent rubric and the superintendent evaluation document. Those items will be going out probably immediately following our next meeting, which is when the superintendent will be presenting his end-of-year goals update. And then the due date, the most important part of this, the due date for superintendent evaluations will be back to me and Julie Lalumiere by Friday, May 23rd. So you'll have about 2 weeks from when you get the full report out on the end-of-year goals report to then do the evaluation, fill out the rubric, and send that back to me for consolidation and reporting back out to the community as a whole. I'm quite happy to say that everybody who's participating in this process this year has done it at least once before, but should you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to walk you through this. And to whomever gets the seats that are vacated, you don't have to fill out the evaluation, but again, I'll be happy to speak with any of those people about the process because it is a bit daunting. And with that, we're going to move on to, any questions on the superintendent evaluation process? Seeing none. Subcommittee and member reports. So policy sub, you met, and I think we've discussed pretty much at depth what you guys have been working on. Thank you for that. Budget sub, Rebeccah.
Budget sub met on whatever Monday was. It was the 14th at 2 p.m. on Zoom. We have started discussing town meeting preparations, making our presentation. We did talk about some updates. You heard about the kindergarten enrollment increase. That was a big part of the discussion. I think that was pretty much it. There wasn't a lot of news. And that is the final one that I know about before. I don't know what you guys are doing after I leave.
Since the chair is retiring from the budget subcommittee, we'll have to look. We still have 3 members on that subcommittee, Tori, Andrew, myself. I'll sit in as chair until we reconvene the budget subcommittee. We'll probably have one more meeting, I think, beforehand. As an FYI for school committee members, let me just get a calendar in front of me before I make a fool of myself. Too late? Did someone say that? April 30th, which is a Wednesday evening, there are pre-town meetings in both Acton and Boxborough. So Rebeccah, I believe you'll be presenting the school committee's report out for the Town of Acton town meeting. So you'll get to attend that pre-town meeting. And then Liz and I will be attending the BLF meeting, which will be a pre-town meeting. Acton town meeting is May 5th. Boxborough town meeting is May 12th. Acton town meeting is in the high school auditorium. Please arrive with ample time to get checked in if you're an Acton town meeting member. And if you are not a resident of Acton, please arrive with ample time to explain why you should be allowed to go into the auditorium. And then Boxborough Town Meeting is, like I said, May 12th. We'll get some more information following the pre-town meetings on the 30th, and I'll share out with everybody all the details for both of those town meetings about where and when we should arrive. We typically post tentative school committee meetings for about 6 p.m. prior to both town meetings, just in case something crazy happens and we need to meet beforehand. So please pencil that in on your calendar as a possibility, albeit doubtful. And what else did I have in my notes that I wanted to go over? I'm going to sort of bypass. Does anybody have any pressing liaison reports that they want to share? Andrew.
So Acton-Boxborough Health Insurance Trust met this morning to review our activity in the trust during the run-out period. We currently have about $646,000 on deposit at Blue Cross Blue Shield and continue to pay out statements to Harvard Pilgrim. Most recently, they provided us with a credit of $22,000. Our claims are going to continue to look like this for the next couple of months, and we may have a few additional federal fees. Considering the amount of money on hand at Blue Cross Blue Shield and the waning run-out charges for Harvard Pilgrim and other obligations, Health Insurance Trust voted today to turn back $800,000 to the school and towns within the fiscal year 2025, meaning that there'll be about $616,600 returned to the district based on the existing formula. Methods and timing of the distribution are to be determined, but we're pleased to offer the return of these funds to the school and the towns.
Thank you. Tori.
So ALJ met at 7:30 on April 8th at Town Hall on Zoom. The group did reach consensus about the fiscal year 26 budget column of the ALG plan. For fiscal year 27, there was consensus about reflecting the district's budget increase at a 5.6% Acton assessment increase, and the town's at 5.2%. Beyond that, there was disagreement about what to reflect for fiscal year 28 and further, as well as how to represent that lack of consensus in the warrant for town meeting. We asked for support in advocating for education funding, Chapter 70 reform with the Joint Ways and Means Committee. And thank you to everybody who participated in that. There's a huge letter writing campaign. I think everybody pretty much got to see those. But as part of that, we also had the Acton FinCom and Select Board chairs both write some really strong letters, so that was awesome. Kind of the outcome of this towards the end, our moderator encouraged us all to think about the work that was done to get this budget for this year prepared, and also how to present our different perspectives on the future at town meeting. Shen, you want to?
The last meeting was definitely very, very lively, and there was disagreement about whether or not we have reached consensus. We have not reached consensus. So Tori is correct. We've reached consensus on FY26, right? And the out-year model is where everybody feels like, nope. Apparently has never happened before in ALG process, but I think, I said that at the ALG meeting, I think our town, since it's ALG, sorry, is at a crossroad. We must decide that are we going to be the town and the people who've always supported the schools and children, students, and the future of our community, or we want something else. So it's some heavy things to ponder before town meeting.
Leila.
Yeah, I know for the committee, Adam forwarded an email around the House Ways and Means budget coming out, and they have put out a budget with minimum aid per pupil at $150. Generally, they don't backtrack. So that's generally a good sign. And just for folks to know, the Senate is going to be debating theirs. The Ways and Means Committee will be debating their budget probably over the next month. And then there's kind of a conference committee to figure out between the two budgets that are proposed, where is this going to land. But given all the not so great news about education, that was a brightish spot.
Yeah, and I'll just remind everyone that we did vote to increase our budget by $150,000, hoping that we would get additional state funding. So we will probably go back at some point once the state budget's finalized and amend our budget, not to change the bottom line, but just to change the assessment numbers to take account for additional revenue and reduce the assessments to the towns. Did you want to add something, Peter?
Yeah, just piggybacking on what Leila said, I think, we're hopeful and optimistic about the numbers that came out and also cautious. I think, real positive was Chapter 70 minimum aid being increased. We do see that charter school reimbursement is down for us for next year, so that revenue won't be coming in at the same level necessarily unless that shifts. Regional transportation is still very much up in the air, and I think the House has been very supportive of that. I'm skeptical that regional transportation will ever get funded at 100%. There are very few people who believe that anything should get funded at 100%, so I think it might be higher than 80, maybe 90% might be a nice thing to get to. You know, there is some movement around increasing circuit breaker transportation aid to up to 75%, which would be significant for us. So a lot of numbers in flux right now. And interestingly, both actually for the current fiscal year, FY25, and for FY26, because the supplemental budget had some positive news for us as well. So we're trying to really wrap our heads around exactly what this means for us. We also did get a letter from the IRS confirming that we met all the criteria for the 2.75 million rebate, and that they have indicated that I'm going to say this without a smile, that the check is going to be released in 4 to 6 weeks. And they did say a check would be released, even though we've heard that there are no more checks. So, but we do anticipate that aid will be coming in. So that's a good thing. So we are likely to need to think about how to manage excess and deficiency as we approach the end of the year, because if that aid comes in before the end of the fiscal year, that reimbursement has to go immediately to excess and deficiency. And we know we need that for out years to be able to do, particularly the high school rooftop units that are coming due within the next year or 18 months we need to get to. And we can't exceed our threshold on excess and deficiency. So we probably need to have a mechanism to be able to take that money and put a substantial portion of it over into capital stabilization. So just thinking ahead to that.
And I'm going to suggest, as part of Sherry's Q3 update at our next meeting, maybe we have some indication of what these money flows look like, because there are refunds coming in from a lot of areas, and we have started the process of setting up an additional stabilization fund for health insurance, so I think we've got a lot to share, and let's do that as part of the budget update at our next meeting. Any additional or member liaison updates? Vikram.
So CPAC committee met yesterday, and we talked about there's a new high school coordinator has been hired at the high school. She's in New Hampshire. She's quite liked. Talked about Natalia starting on 7/1, and our largest conversation revolved around right to recess. So again, I strongly advise liaisoning with CPAC and their recommendations for the wording of that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we're going to move on to our school committee communication.
I'm going to blame it on my
Ginny's last meeting, right?
brain injury and say that it takes me a while to process. Vikram, can you send me the language that you're referring to that you would like us to refer to in policy sub?
Yes.
Thanks.
It's getting late. So thank you to Tori, and who else did you work with on the?
Andrew and Liz. Becca, I think, was aware of what we were up to. I'm going to say that silence was consent.
Okay.
And then you and Vikram got to jump in. So
Exactly. So
big team effort.
What I'm going to do, because I think it's important, and I think it's not that anyone's going to be listening in at 2 hours and 20 minutes in our meeting, I am going to read out the narrative that the group came up with. It's one that I think we all need to internalize and be able to speak about with our community. So here it is. Imagine a future where our schools are designed to meet the needs of the community, from our taxpayers to our students, a place where teachers feel supported, not overwhelmed, and students thrive in the best possible learning environment. Picture a community that celebrates its outstanding, sustainable schools. What would that look like for your family? For all of us? Everything's on the table. You may have heard about the challenges of recent years and tough choices we've had to meet to balance the budget. The funding we receive from our towns and the state is no longer keeping up with external factors driving up costs in our current system. The reality is the way we've structured and funded our education over the past 50 years is no longer enough to meet the fast-changing needs of today. We're taking this on because we believe our students and our community. We believe in our students and our community. Our goal is to build something sustainable that will endure for decades, not just a patchwork solutions for another budget cycle. Our ever-changing world demands more from both our educators and our graduates. We are committed to ensuring every student has the opportunity to reach their full potential, and that our educators have the resources they need to support that goal. At the same time, we also recognize that our community must be able to afford our schools. This isn't just about saving money, it's about being smart with the resources we have. Acton-Boxborough has evolved, and our students need new skills that our current system isn't equipped to provide. That's why we're reimagining how we approach education, rethinking everything from the number of schools and grade configurations to how we match students with the best opportunities for growth. While there's still much more to explore, we're excited about these possibilities ahead. We know this process brings uncertainty, and that can be scary, but we're committed to designing a sustainable, innovative structure that allows us to rise together and meet the challenges of the next 50 years. We need your voice in this conversation. We can't do this alone. Together, we can shape the future of education in Acton and Boxborough. So I think I'm just going to copy and paste that right into our town meeting speeches. So this was great work. Thank you. This is in the agenda that's in the packet for everybody. Please share even just this text broadly. Use it as your talking points with anybody. Any other school committee goal communication updates, sharing? No. All right. So I'm going to go back to the agenda here, and we're at the consent agenda. So items on our consent agenda do not usually require discussion, approved with one vote, unless any member would like something held. If you would like it held, please say hold. Remember, you don't have to be at a meeting to vote on the minutes. Item A, approval of ABRSD meeting minutes from 3/20/25. Item B, approval of ABRSD meeting minutes of 4/3/2025. FY25 budget transfers. Item D, approval of warrants as presented in the packet of 4/17/25. Item E, approval of Acton-Boxborough Friends of Drama Booster Organization of $4,000 donation to Proscenium Circus. Item F, approval of Football Boosters Organization donation of wireless headsets valued at $2,333.40 to the ABRHS football program. And item G, approval of Blanchard's PTF donation of $1,650 for Nature's Classroom in-house field trip. Is there a recommendation to approve the items, or is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved with appreciation
Seconded.
on those donations.
So that was Liz with appreciation and Ben seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Peter, anything in the FYI we want to highlight?
Yeah, just Student Opportunity Act progress report. That is something that, we have submitted to DESE at this point. We're required to do every year. We need to make you aware of it, but it's not something that you need to vote, so we put that in the FYI. It's just an update on the chronic absenteeism work that we've been doing. So you'll hear more about it as we progress through the year.
Thank you very much. Ginny, would you like to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Rebeccah?
I'd like to second that.
So that was Ginny making the motion and Rebeccah seconding. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.